Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Thursday. It's January 13th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and this is going to wrap it up for the week. No chart lessons on Fridays. Um, I, like I said, I hadn't been trading this week. I'm still not really back to 100% yet, and I have a really hard time concentrating. I don't know if any of you have had COVID and had that issue, but have a hard time, have headaches and a hard time concentrating still to this day. So um, even though I'm pretty much over my serious symptoms, I'm still having symptoms and just not 100% yet. So I'm just trying to take it easy still and try to ease back into this. Hopefully, maybe next week I'll be better after another weekend of being able to just rest here. So we'll see. I will come in tomorrow and do a mid-morning chart lesson and try to answer some emails, maybe read some of the forum and answer some questions there if I can. So, but it'll probably be a real short day for me tomorrow, and then another long weekend, and then hopefully next week. I'm not going to make any promises because I'm still shocked that I'm not over this yet, 100%. But this thing's been tough, so be careful out there. If you get it, take care of yourself, and don't underestimate this virus because it can be tough. So anyway, let's get to the trades, to the chart. Clear, huge downtrend today, very strong downtrend. I mean, this is basically a 100-point move down. We started up here around 47.40 and we traded all the way down close to 46.40. So really strong downtrend. There's a larger two-tiered channel. Obviously, you're probably going to trade the shorter term stuff most of the time in here. What looked like was going to be a tight range today just suddenly sold off, and it was all downhill from there. And I don't know that there was anything that probably came out here that if there was some news item or something that suddenly started this thing lower. There were some uh, FOMC speakers and things today, but maybe there's something they said. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. We don't really care about that. All we want to do is follow the price action. So you didn't get a lot of chance to enter this one. There were some more shorts in here, but I mean these violent reversals that are real strong and fast just make it real difficult to trade this at times because just when you think you got it figured out, it reverses on you. So I'm really not that sad that I haven't traded this week because there's been some tough trading. Today it was a little better than some of the days we've had, but there's still some tough trading in here, and you can get whipsawed in very quickly. So anyway, let's zoom in, go through the trades, and wrap this day up. And I really didn't see a trade I liked until almost 9 o'clock again. 7 o'clock came over in here, and there's just no setups here really. You just don't get a chance to enter this. You might have looked at that as two legs back. Even though we make a higher high there, it still looks like two legs back to the trend line in the EMA, and it's a very nice signal bar. So, if you took that, I wouldn't fault you too much. Although it's almost always better to wait on that second entry, and you never really get one. So it just runs to a new high, and you actually get a second entry here. Um, but if you draw your trend channel coming down, it's just way too early to enter, as you can see there, because you don't get a close outside of that till here, and that's really congestive right across there. I mean, you can clearly see this bar has no body, this bar barely has any body, and by the time this triggers, this is just another inside bar. There's been some discussion about this lately, people not quite understanding what constitutes congestion and why one part is congested and why one's not. But if you see that bar right there, you can clearly see that bar is completely inside of it. This one makes a little higher high, but when you got stems like this on both sides, that's telling you something. It couldn't go up, it can't go down. We're finding support at the EMA, but we're having selling coming in at the same time, and it actually breaks lower before it goes higher. So be careful in that congestion. If you're not a really good chart reader that you understand when congestion's all right and when it's not, just avoid it. Yeah, you'll miss some trades, but you'll be better off in the long run because you'll save yourself a lot of losses. And new inexperienced chart readers, they don't quite get that. So make sure you hear that and hear exactly what I'm saying is if you don't quite, the true rule on congestion is anytime you have 3 or more bars stacked side by side and at least one of them has no body or a very small body, that can be congestion. Now, it doesn't mean that just because there's congestion doesn't mean there's not a reason you can't take a trade. But if you're not good enough to understand when it's okay and when it's not, just avoid congestion and you'll miss some good trades, but you'll save yourself a lot of losers. And in the long run, you'll be better off. And then as you do start to get better at reading the chart and understanding when it's okay and when it's not, then you can start to try to trade some of it. But don't rush it. This takes a long time. This is like trying to learn any kind of non-native language. You don't just pick up a book and read it and suddenly you're fluent in another language. Very few people can do that. And trading's no different. This is a language. This chart speaks a language. And until you understand that, and this is a hard language, very hard. One of the most, I would say this is more difficult than most languages. So obviously once you can speak Spanish, it's much easier to learn Italian and some of those other languages because they're very similar. But it's more like trying to say, hey, I grew up, my native language is Chinese, but I'm trying to speak Russian. Those are a little more difficult. And so this, just like a chart. So the chart's difficult like that. So make sure you understand that. But anyway, we finally ran up here. Notice we got a break, moved to a new high, and there's a second entry short there. Little ways away from the EMA, and we had all this congestion that we broke out of, so prices will probably pull back even if they're going to go higher. So I like that one to possibly ride it back to the EMA. Again, it's not ideal. It is a second entry, and we did push lower here, and we are finding resistance up here. And it's a second entry, and you're just going to try to, with that much room back to the EMA, there's probably enough room to get a scalp out of that, even if we're going to go higher. Again, it's not ideal, so I made it green. And then of course, we bounced here again. And this one's very tempting because it's such a strong signal bar that bounced right off the support. And that's what rejection kind of looks like, but we came back real quickly. And we struggled to go higher. But notice how we're going sideways right there. That's not rejection. That's acceptance of prices at that level. And you can see a lot of stems on the upper side and the closing low. So the prices still have some room to go lower there. And I'm going to talk about, I think it was this trade here that somebody took and they thought they were buying a bounce off of the lows of the range. Well, we haven't even got back to the lows yet. Their signal bar was a little better than mine. That's not a very good signal bar at all. So actually, I think they entered right here. This is where they entered. But notice we just came off the lows, and so we're not going to come back to the lows until we get to the highs probably. So now we've made it to the highs and we come back. Well, buying right here, just because there's a second entry long, you're not even back to the support yet. Support is down here. It's not, sure, we bounced a few times there, but that's because prices were working higher. Now they're working lower. So you want them to at least get to that point, and that's the first bar that got there, and it didn't hold. Prices just went on down. So there's no reason to go long right here. In fact, that's a great trap to go short as long as you got room to get out before those lows, which you do. And it wouldn't have mattered because this thing just keeps going. But make sure you got room to get out between here and this support, or don't take that trade. So in general, you'd like this trade to be back to the EMA, but the fact that it breaks higher right there and then instantly turns down, you know you got the longs trapped. And it's just, that's a huge mistake to try to go long there. You're just trying to pick a bottom right there if you're going long right there. There's no reason. There's nothing that says go long here. In fact, you just had a failed break out the high side, which will probably give it enough momentum to run the stops on this side, even if it's going to bounce. So it'll probably break through and fail and then come back. And it eventually does fail and try to come back, but it can't get back. It can't get through this resistance level right here, which was the close from yesterday. So, so no, there's no longs in here. I don't see anything that would. You got a decent signal bar right there, but you got this one right beside it. So you already got two stacked side by side, and you're not back to the lows yet. So why? So make sure you understand that that's not a good place to go long at all. Um, and again, I marked this short. You're better off to wait on the lower high, which we get one, but it's not, again, it's not a very good setup. The signal bar doesn't even qualify. So, but if you wait till right here and you enter this, just looking for the scalp, not trying to get greedy, you get rewarded. And this thing just, I mean, you get a runner here, and you can ride that all the way down. And this is a little spiking channel. We work down, we finally get a close outside, move to a new low, and then you get a two-legged correction. And a lot of times that's the center of a pattern. So of course you'd want to measure that. And you can see we actually bounced early there. But I also measured this whole move here and got another one here, and that would give you the measured move down to here. And we actually went a little further before it bounced. Market got really weak in here, so that was the measured moves I was looking at today. But definitely you want to measure this leg, and then where you get this two-legged correction, look for a possible another measured move down. And although we broke below the overnight lows, they just couldn't sustain it yet. It was just too early. There's too much buying coming in at that price level still. So anyway, we dropped on down here. I don't see any entries down through here. Nothing that would talk me into going short way down here this far away from the EMA. But we do bounce here. You get a first entry and then you get a second entry. But there's just too much sideways right there. And this is an inside bar. This is technically your signal bar, this bullish bar, and you can't take that. And you see it fails real quickly. And you don't want to take the reversal because it's still below the EMA and it's right into all that resistance right there. But it does fail and break out, and that gives you a second entry short on the breakout. And notice how it makes a triple test here. It actually makes a quadruple because you really had a triple test here. And going back and looking at that, if you did see that triple test there with that bearish bar, if you've got room to scalp out between here and here, you might take that trade because it's a really good signal bar. But when it came back here again and turned down that far away from the EMA on the second entry short, I like going short right there. So prices run down, and then we just get into this. Don't even try to enter that. It's just not worth it. It's not a good setup here. You do get a triple test here, but no signal bars. It does turn on down, and of course it fails on the breakout. But I don't see anything that would make me want to go long right here. We do bounce right here, but I'd want to see it tested again. It does make a higher low, but that's just a very weak bar and not much room back to these highs. And you see what happens. It breaks higher and fails, and it's going lower again. And again, there's a second entry. This looks similar to this right here. There's a second entry short and a double top, and that's a fairly bearish bar. I didn't mark it, but that's another one you could say, hey, you know, maybe you take that trade. But with prices trying to bounce down here, it makes me a little nervous going short right there. So you get another second entry here, but again, not a very good signal bar. Then you just kind of get congestion, not much room to the lows, and of course it bounces. We've got some sideways stuff here, but finally prices touch that again and rock it up and then break higher and go. That's what rejection looks like. Generally, you don't want to see these two bars prior to that, but that's what rejection looks like. That's what you want to see when you go long, and you could technically go long right there. I didn't mark it because of these couple of bars that came first, but that's what rejection looks like. Once the buying came in, boom, it rockets straight up, and then you get a break, move to a new high, And it's so tempting to go short here, and it would have worked, but you can get burned on that. I mean, you really didn't have this trend line set. This kind of set it. And then we kind of pushed down, came back, and gave us this really bearish bar on a lower high here. And so you might have taken that. I mean, I really like that setup, but because of the way it's right into the EMA, I was a little hesitant to mark that red because it could bounce on you and stop you out and then go down. But it's pretty clear this trend line was here now, and when it came back to it again and gave you that very bearish bar, you could look at that like a lower high. And that's how I mark that one. But it is green. It's a little aggressive. And of course, you get this whole big move down, and you don't get any opportunity to really enter it. There's a hidden second entry here. It's not a perfect signal bar. It does look like it's going to be a key entry point. So again, maybe you want to be aggressive, you take that trade, but I'm not crazy about it. And prices just take off like a rocket, and you just really don't get another chance to enter until here. Notice you're working up, and finally you get a close outside a new high, and that's a second entry short. And that's the first break of that yellow channel, so you're going to most likely get a retest, and we actually make a new low there. And it bounces, comes back, and that looks like two legs right there, which gives you a possible center of the pattern. So again, measure this leg here, which we've already got measured, and see what happens. But the problem is you've got this channel here, and we just came off the low. So before you're going to make any more lows here, you're probably going to go higher. But you can see that would have been a good target in the end. We came on down to it. Actually surpassed it. But we bounced here. You got a lower high, and then finally a failure here. This was a nice failure setup. And boom, off it goes. Your entry, unless you're going to wait for this bar to close and go short one tick below it, your entries, I'm not sure if it broke lower or higher first, to be honest. But because it's an engulfing bar, your stop would have to go above the last swing here until this bar closed, and then you put your stop one tick above it. It's the only way you can trade those engulfing bars without getting burned. Then of course you get a second entry short right at the key, first break of the key entry point right at the EMA, big bearish bar. And even though you didn't get a big move out of that, it's a quick, easy scalp. You actually get another triple test here, but that bar is not good, and that signal bar is not good enough. And then it bounces and goes higher. And we were overdue to come back to the other side, but notice here when we can't even get back to the trend line, and this thing's rocketing down again, that tells you the market's really weak. So, but you got this channel moving up, you get a break, couple legs to a new high, and there's a failure right here, but it's on the wrong side of the EMA. But it also gives you a first entry, second entry. And I looked at this as a double top and then a first entry, second entry. So I counted that as the failure on a failed second entry long and a second entry short. And you can see it was a quick, easy move, and then we're just chopping sideways again and went on higher. But this had played out, and it just played out way too early because you would expect prices to come back up here. And that's why once we came back and tested that midline again, we tried another run at it and still couldn't get there. Unfortunately, you just really don't get a good chance to trade this lower. There is a lot of resistance here, so you could look at this as a failed break higher. See all that resistance. There's a little channel right there, basically, or a little range, I guess is what I meant to say, not a channel. And you could treat that like a failed breakout. But generally, you still want a lower high, and that comes right here, and it's right into the EMA. So I just don't like it. There is a second entry here, but your signal bar is this bar, so it doesn't set up very good. It's kind of in an odd spot, but that just shows you how weak this market is. And then you have another attempt to come back here that you might have looked at as a failure and a double top, but I didn't mark it, but it's another one you could argue maybe to be green. And then again, we're just going sideways here in another little tight range. And you just have to be real careful on these. I don't see anything in there. Again, you bounce here, there's a triple test, but there's no rejection here until it finally bounces, and it's just really hard to know if it's going to go higher or not. So you do get a fairly nice bearish bar right here, but again, this is the signal bar and it's neutral. It's got no body, so that's congestion. It turns out to be a nice move, but when it sets up, it just doesn't set up right. And then we just chop on down. I don't see anything here that really gives you a good setup until here. You get a second entry here, not a good signal bar, but you get the lower high here that breaks higher and traps everybody and turns down. Go short one tick below that, or either wait for that to close and go short one tick below it. You could trade that either way. And then that takes you into the 2:30 hour. And there's actually another second entry right here. This was actually the original signal bar here, but because these have matching eyes, you could actually take this one. It's just right after 2:30, so if you took that right off the midline, because once you push through, you expect prices to come back and test it, even if they're going lower, and that's a perfect little retest of the midline, and then prices turn lower again. So yeah, if you took that one, not too big a deal because it's right at 2:30, and that was it. So it was mostly all downhill. I don't see any reason to try to buy this thing. I mean, there's a few rocket moves up, but they're just not any good setups to catch them. And I think most of it, what would happen is they'd start some stop running and it would run it up. But as soon as those stops ran out, the bottom falls out of it again. So you got to be careful buying on days like this, because that's what will happen to you. You don't recognize this is going to happen until it's done. It's already happened, and then you don't really get a second opportunity. It just ends when all the stops are run and it turns down again. So just be careful buying those. And hopefully this long up here that we talked about makes sense now to the person that sent me that. Hopefully you watch the video and get a little more explanation on that. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up our week. Hope you had a good trading week. It's been a tough week. It really has. This has not been the easiest trading. Yesterday was horrific. Today, there was a little better trading yesterday. Today was much better because at least you knew the right direction. It was mostly all downhill and strongly. So I would say that started right here around 11 o'clock. Actually, you could say it probably started here, but you couldn't rule out that it was going to be a range day until here. And that's when it really, you could say, hey, we got a big downtrend day coming here, maybe. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully we'll be back Monday, and I'll be back feeling much better as well. But I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap this week up. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.